So starting off the big Tomb King history week I've got planned here for you guys, we're going to conclude with our last legendary lord, or at least legendary hero in this case, Ramhotep the Visionary. Hopefully you guys have been enjoying this kind of foray, this walk down Tomb King Lane. And I will be actually changing the playlist for this to just be Tomb Kings, because I'm going to be making a Tomb King video here that is twofold. It will be the units, and then it'll be the history of the Tomb Kings. There's so much to cover here. It's such a massive undertaking as far as the knowledge of this whole army book. I mean, I didn't play the Tomb Kings very much. I mainly played vampire accounts, so my exposure to Tomb Kings was more, okay, they're my enemy. But I mean, I have the Tomb King book, I read here and there, but to really kind of delve deep into the lore of them has been pretty eye-opening for me, to really see how much, or at least how big of a player in the grand scheme of things as they were, you know. And we'll jump into that more. I almost started getting to it a little too much here, but we'll get into that the history video that's coming out here, hopefully on Tuesday, if not Wednesday. But I want to jump into on the last hero here. Ramhotep the Visionary was perhaps the greatest Necrotet in history. His craftsmanship was second to none, and it is said that his statues in the Valley of Kings were so lifelike that the kings of Nehekhara believed the gods themselves had returned to the mortal world. He designed the grand necropolis of Rystera, the monuments of eternal death in the Zalindri, the monoliths of the Great Plains, and many other architectural wonders. However, Ramhotep took credit for not one of these grand monuments, for to do so would have been tantamount to signing his own death warrant. In ancient Nehekhara, the finest artisans were commissioned to build grand burial tombs, and upon completion they were expected to commit ritual suicide. Ramhotep was aghast at the thought, for it would deny the world of the beautiful creations he had yet to make. Thus, Ramhotep would manipulate the more arrogant Necrotets of the age to take his place. Ramhotep posed as an eager student to the renowned Ramhotep the creative, as a pupil to the Emrah the artisan, and as an art assistant to a dozen other legendary architects. These great artisans were stricken with blood lotus addiction shortly afterwards, consumed in a drug-addled stupor, as Ramhotep crafted a mask in their image, one so perfect that none could tell the difference. Ramhotep assumed their identities and oversaw the construction of the many magnificent monuments. Each time, shortly before the project's completion, he disappeared, and a very confused Necrotet was sacrificed and interred within the tomb in Ramhotep's stead. It is said that they protested loudly, but these were dismissed as the ravings of a mad artist. In life, Ramhotep was consumed by a frenzied compulsion to create and build. No matter how quickly his underlings accomplished their task, it was not fast enough for Ramhotep, for there were always more ambitious and grander projects that needed his attention. However, Ramhotep's vision reached past his mortal lifespan, and as he withered in his old age, he realized that the only way he could finish his work was if he was granted the honor of mummification. Thus, after several decades of careful anonymity, Ramhotep removed his mask and agreed to build a pyramid that would rival the majesty of the Great Pyramid of Khemri. Thousands of work gangs slaved and died under the desert sun to build the sepulchre of the heavens in Qatar, and none dared slacken their pace in his presence, for Ramhotep was quick with the lash and would dole out fierce punishments to those who would jeopardize his art. In his final days, before the last cornerstone was heaved into position, Ramhotep fashioned for himself a death mask and prepared himself for his interment. The king of Qatar was mightily pleased with his tomb and rewarded Ramhotep with an exquisite burial ceremony. For countless centuries afterwards, the artisan's corpse rested with his splendid monument. Few of Ramhotep's works have endured unscathed through the ages. Half of his creations lie forgotten beneath the sands, and those who have remained have been battered by centuries of war and eroded by time and sandstorms. Upon awakening from his death sleep, Ramhotep was horrified, and he set about excavating and restoring his marvels at once. Ramhotep's skill in undeath is as great as it was in life, and the statues that received his attentions are restored to their former majesty, striding into battle as if they were carved on only yesterday. He works relentlessly to maintain his masterpieces, and such is the likeness between these effigies and the gods they represent, that the ancient pantheon blesses them and protects them in battle. With his army of walking statues, Ramhotep intends to pull down the cities of those who defiled his work, slay the inhabitants of these uncultured civilizations, and construct the greatest monument to date. A vast mausoleum built from the bones of his foes. Those who stand in his way feel the lash of Ramhotep's whip, and their flesh parts from their bones, as the ancient architect vents his frustration and anger. So you have here the Necrotet, or architect, as it were, of Kemri, and these guys basically constructed all of the pyramids, all the statues, all the obelisks, everything that we see throughout Kemri, throughout all of Neakhara. These guys are very important to the overall theme, I guess you could say, because we know it to be very distinctly Egyptian, but overall they contribute to the obsession with death and how the mortuary cult creates basically these mummies to go into the great tombs of the Necrotet create, or commissioned to create, for their lords or lieges. And he is, as you can see, a pretty cool lord. You know, he's got a little bit of a little subterfuge there in trying to trick other lords into, other Necrotets into taking his credit so he can live longer. So he's got kind of a little bit of an interesting history there, and he kind of helps bolster some of the constructs that you see throughout the Tomb King's army, or roster and army list, I guess you could say, as a whole. So that's kind of his role. The Necrotet roles in general is kind of almost like the Beastmaster of some of the other races and their connection to the beasts of, I guess, of their rosters. But he, effectively what he does is he bolsters, again, those constructs. You know, he's got this special ability called Frantic Fervor, and he gives Frenzy to any unit he accompanies, and if he leaves a unit, they no longer get Frenzy. So I'm not sure if that would make him, or give him the ability to have a targetable frenzy, so he can like pop it on someone and they just kind of go to town rather than having to worry about any kind of leadership or anything like that until Warhammer 2. I honestly don't think Ramhotep will make it into the game, because a lot of his rules are very hard to translate in my mind. He does have frenzy, he does have hatred, he's flammable like all the other Tomb Kings, but his weapon, his profile is not that awesome, because again, what he's supposed to do here is bolster and improve the constructs. I guess, you know, a good way to compare him would be like the engineers of the dwarfs and how they bolster and improve all of the range damage or the artillery damage coming out of the dwarf army. He would do that for the constructs. What he can actually do is anything that's got an animated construct special rule, so any of the constructs, he can basically heal them or give them ability to reroll failed armor saves during the battle. So how I would kind of see that translate in Total War would be something that it would increase armor, or maybe increase defense. I don't really, or maybe even just a quick heal. That would be kind of a cool, interesting way to do things, almost like a what we already get with the vampires, and they're either their targeted heal with a range, or their AoE heal. So I'd like to see kind of something like that, because he is a master artisan after all. So it kind of makes sense that he would have an ability that allows him to bolster, or I'm sorry, not bolster, but heal up the constructs that he is so lovingly created. But I've got a cool little blurb here at the very end of Ramhotep the Visionary. It's kind of a nice one, so I'm going to read this as well. Ramhotep's Revenge. When an Empire army from Reichland invaded Qatar in the Imperial year 2141, they damaged dozens of Ramhotep's works as they looted the city's tombs. This desecration was bad enough, but when the steam tank Deliverance smashed through Ramhotep's terracotta wall, the Necrotet entered a fit of apoplectic rage, and he swore he would have his revenge. Ramhotep worked for over a century to complete the restoration of his marble army, an awe-inspiring host of hundreds of towering constructs. Such was the demented architect's need for vengeance that in exchange for 8 jade warp sphinxes, he enlisted the aid of Arkan the Black, who raised a mighty bridge of bone through the dark sorcery to span the Black Mountains. Ramhotep's statuesque army marched across, and the cities of Uberseik and Grunberg were all but destroyed, despite the fact that every soldier to have been involved in the destruction of his precious masterpiece have been dead for almost 170 years. So it's really kind of awesome, the everlasting revenge that is filled in the Tomb Kings. So we're going to get into a lot more of that here as we jump into Tomb Kings Week and go into the history of the Tomb Kings, as well as all of their units and the origin of their units as well. I'm really excited to kind of share this with you guys. I know a lot of you are really excited and have been asking for it, and a lot of you have wondered, hey, what's next on the race docket? So we will be doing Ogre Kingdoms in a very similar way we've been doing the Tomb Kings. So we'll have a kind of a nice, easy playlist you can just kind of hit play on and hear about every little thing in a kind of a bite-sized fashion, so you don't have to listen to a huge 2-hour epic. But I'm pretty sure the history video will be a huge 2-hour epic. But that's neither here nor there. But thanks for watching here today, guys. Have a good one. If you have any other questions about this lore or any of the lores that we've talked about, or the history we're to talk about, please go ahead and leave me a comment about that. I'd love to just kind of fill in as much information as I can. But have a good one, guys, and take care.